At present scenario, we have been observed from the last 12 years that generally people want to do psychology, maybe due to their personal reasons or due to their careers or due to their lack of awareness. Then, of course, students or participants will observe. So anyhow, today we are going to discuss about the topic psychology and its concerns, the very important topic, theoretical and applied issues. At present scenario, we have been observed and from the last 12 years, so many students are joining in this course due to their interest or their personal career or whatever it may be. Anyhow, we need to understand how and why the psychological science must adapt in order to realizing and its enormous global finance, global potentials. So in this regard, we are invited our Dean, Professor Vadyanam Srinivas sir, Dean, Faculty of Social Science and Professor of History, and Speaker, Professor Misra sir. After some time, Janardhan sir will introduce our speaker today's about the speaker. So I will hand over to Professor Vadyanam Srinivas sir.
Sir, good afternoon to you all. Honorable guest and speaker, Professor Girishwar Mishra Garu, and Senior Professor Janardhan Reddy Garu, and my friends in the department, Narsimulu Garu, Sriveni Garu, Guruvaya Garu, and other departments friends, Dr. Nagaraj Garu, Dr. Aravind Garu, and all the participants. I welcome you all to this webinar. First of all, I'd like to express my sincere thanks to our Professor Girishwar Mishra Garu, because he's a very busy man. So, and also our Curriculum Design Development Committee Chairman, also our respected Mishra ji, and also is a most influential psychologist in this country. Thank you very much, sir. Our Open University is the first Open University in this country, and psychology is one of the dynamic subject in our faculty also. And from our psychology department, we offer courses in diploma in psychology counseling, and UG level also we are offering one separate course for UG students. And PG also, MSc Psychology we are offering, sir. And thousands of students are approaching and they are enrolled in our MSc Psychology program. And in many ways, we are interacting. Our students are like we have a YouTube channel. We record the video lessons and audio lessons, and we have separate YouTube channel also. And in this kind of webinars, our distance learners definitely they will help. They will get some knowledge through this webinar, sir. Because this is we have a clear idea to conduct this webinar, sir, to give more opportunities to learn different areas. You invite experts like you and from the globe, and we request all of them to give lectures for our open distance learners. And after completion of this lecture also, we keep this recorded lecture program in our YouTube channel and other platforms also, so that our learners can get this information at any moment, at any time, sir. This is our plan, sir. And also other important issue is we are revising PG semester, PG program now, and already you are the chairperson. We have framed syllabus, like we incorporated recent trends in the psychology area, and like this psychology and its concern, theoretical and applied issues also may be there in our syllabus also. So our students definitely will be get some information through this lecture, sir. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Now I request Professor Janardhan Reddy Garu to introduce our today's guest, sir, guest speaker. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir. Professor Vadyanam Srinivas garu. And today's speaker, Professor Girishwar Mishra ji, Dr. Narsimulu, and our colleagues, Sridevi and Sriveni and Guravaya. At the outset, on behalf of the department, I also extend a warm welcome to all the participants, especially today's speaker, Professor Misraji. The department has been organizing various seminars since a long time. Last month also we had two webinars. One webinar was on applied behavior analysis that was done by Professor Sri Krishna from National Institute of Mentally Handicapped. And another program was there last month on psychoanalysis. That lecture was delivered by Professor Srikanth Reddy and former Vice Chancellor of Sri Venkateswara University, Tirupati. And today's topic, as you all know, the topic is psychology concern and theoretical and methodological issues. For this important topic, we have the university has invited eminent scholar in the field of psychology. It is Professor Girishwar Misraji. He has done extensive work in Indian psychology. He's a great person. We are very happy to have him as today's speaker because of his eminence and also expertise in the different areas of psychology. I'm also happy to introduce our guest, Professor Girishwar Misraji. He was Vice Chancellor of Antarrashtriya Hindi Viswavidyalaya in the university that was there in Wardha, Maharashtra. Besides that, he is an eminent psychologist, as I said. He is a world-renowned psychologist. In one survey, he was ranked ninth in top 10 world psychologists. He occupied ninth place among the 10 world psychologists. He is a highly experienced person, and he made significant contribution to Indian psychology. He has written fantastic books on Indian psychology, not one or two books. He has written many books. Mostly, it seems it focused on India. Most of the titles, either suffix or suffix, we will have in India, because his focus is he was on Indian psychology. He had higher education from Gorakhpur University, and he started his career as a lecturer in Gorakhpur University long back. And thereon he moved from Gorakhpur University to Allahabad University as reader. And again he went to Bhopal University as a professor, finally retired from Delhi University as a professor of psychology. And currently he is also a honorary professor of psychology in Sri Sri University, Orissa. Regarding his contribution to the field, as I said earlier, he has authored and also edited many books. One book, recently it is released. There is Psychology in Modern India. And earlier the many books are there. Handbook on psychology and the psychology and social development. It is an important book. And Psychology for India, Perspectives on Indigenous Psychology, Applied Social Psychology in India, Psychological Perspectives, and also the handbook, Psychological Perspectives on Health and Stress. Like this, there are a number of books are there. And besides the books, he is written or edited. And he is also a chief editor and editor for different journals. One important, prestigious journal is Psychological Issues. There is a journal of Indian Academy of Psychology. He was editor for that journal for about 15 years. And he was also chief editor of one of the survey report of the ICSSR, Indian Council of Social Science Research. And besides his contribution in English medium. He also written various books in Hindi also. As he has written books and also articles are also there. And we are very happy to have him as a guest speaker or a resource person or expert for today's program. And today's topic is very relevant. He has chosen a wonderful topic. He is going to focus on the roots of psychology. His lecture he will be focusing on psychology concerns. As part of that, he will be discussing on theoretical issues and also methodological issues. And he is focusing on the approaches to be followed in non-Western countries. Now he is going to question the basic roots regarding the approaches that we are following. Which approach is apt for Indian or non-Western countries? Because the approach or the research methodologies are mostly based on Western philosophy, Western culture. Now we have to think whether the same methodology, whether the same approach is applicable for non-Western countries. Western countries' approach is said, according has a revolutionary ideas on this, radical issues. They have ignored the poverty issues in various countries. The Western countries or Western approach has neglected inter-class disparities in or between social classes and absence of focus on cultural aspects. So he said cultural aspects or cultural context has to be taken or social context has to be taken when we understand the human behavior. So all these things we will be going to discuss, and both theoretical issues and methodological issues that we need to understand. Now I request Professor Girish Mishraji to speak on today's topic. Over to Mishraji.
Thank you, Professor Reddy. I express gratitude to the university colleagues, Dean of the faculty, and Professor Reddy and his colleagues who have created this opportunity to discuss some of the issues pertaining to the discipline of psychology. Friends, psychology is a relatively young discipline. It's young in the community of modern sciences. The structure of the discipline and its development has taken place in the European and North American context. And they have provided certain theories, they have provided certain methods, and we have been preoccupied with the issues and problems which were identified by researchers in these regions of world. Knowledge is important, and if knowledge is something to be considered as great, as useful, it has to connect with culture. The challenge that we face is that there are certain difficulties. As a student of psychology, we need to understand some of the complexities which are there when we try to understand human behavior in cultural context. What I'm going to do is to share some of the thoughts which are pertinent to the issue of the structure of the discipline, its methodology, and some of the key concerns will be addressed. To begin with, I would like to mention that human behavior is very complex and fascinating. We find there are individual differences, there are differences at the level of community, there are differences at the level of nation. In order to understand human behavior and help people to realize their goals, we have to see how these principles operate across different contexts. We find that in the last 2 decades, there has been recognition that most of the psychological research has taken place in the Western world, and what has been happening in the majority world, that is where about 95% of the world population lives. It's very important to remember that we don't find representation at empirical level as well as at conceptual level. There is neglect of the majority world. When I'm using the word majority world, it refers to South Asia and other countries. The remaining part, the countries which are considered as advanced or developed, North America, Europe particularly, they have provided a major source of ideas and research in the field of psychology. And if psychology assumes that psychology should be global and psychology should respond to the needs of people across the globe, then it must grow and adapt to the challenges faced in not only in European or North American countries, but in other areas. I would like to draw attention to some concepts. It is important to understand the implication of those concepts. Let me introduce the idea of reductionism. And reductionism as an idea that you want to explain a complex process on the basis of some simpler processes, and you want to reduce all complexities to a lower level. We know that a lot of work has been done in psychology with rats, and you study them, and once upon a time, the whole area of learning was dominated by studies with rats. And the idea was that one could work there and can develop principles which will be applied in some modified form to the higher level. So the title of one of the books is Purposive Behavior in Animal and Man. this is one very important book published in 50s. The tradition has continued. So reductionism is one problem. There is another problem which occurs because of the socio-political context and the assumptions which emerge in that context. We find that there is individual level competition, and the concepts, theories, applications relevant to that context has a peculiar imprint of that particular cultural context. So the American society, which is meritocratic, where there is open competition, provides one way to look at reality, to develop concepts. I will illustrate this idea in the next few minutes. The mainstream psychology tries to work at the micro level, and from there it goes to macro level. And there is very little attention to the context in which behavior takes place. So, reductionism, competition, emphasis on individual, lack of interest in context becomes the very basis. They formulate a foundation for the kind of psychology which develops. So, understanding behavior at micro level only and disregarding the entire complex nature of behavior creates a misunderstanding of human behavior. You can't generalize from that micro to macro. And there are many issues pertaining to that. Even if you go to analysis, you do that. We collect data at individual level. We focus more on individual responses. How we conceptualize, how we use that, and how micro can be converted to macro level. You see, studying single individual or getting data from each individual and then using that to understand the group is a problem, because group as it exists, as it operates, as it functions, has a reality which is not sum of the individuals. It is more than that. Then there is another very important question which has been raised by many scholars, and that is that we devote our energy to understand the causal relationship between one variable and another variable. Now, the choice of psychological variables largely relates to the individual. If you look at the variables which we use, you have interest, you have intelligence, you have motivation, you have personality. All the attributes which are present in the individual, they are taken. They are used as predictors or independent variables to understand certain aspects of human functioning. But what happens at the collective level? The collective dynamics, or what is the role of poverty which is present in society? What is the role of social class? We don't have time to discuss all these concepts, but these macro level processes are going to shape individual behavior. Individual behavior cannot be explained merely by taking into account certain specific variables at individual level. That is one hunch. It's not sufficient. We have not been able to explain changes in behavior, functioning simply on the basis of certain specific variables. We forget about other variables. It's a big question. I'm not sure whether you have seen the results of studies. If you go to specific papers, you will see that correlations are very low. The independent or the predictors have a limited relationship with the selected, chosen, dependent variable or criterion, whatever you call it. So that relationship is very limited in its application. You don't bother about other things which are there and which do influence our behavior. If you remember about the ecological model of Urey, Braun, Fein, Brenner, I am sure you must have seen that. That there is an individual, then there are different levels, concentric layers of ecology in which individual develops. So there, a human being, a child is in family, family is in a specific locality, and that locality is in city, and that is in state. Again, there is another layer where there are rules and legal provisions at national level. So these concentric levels provide different levels of functioning and they do influence individuals' behavior. If you focus only on individual, if we don't focus on the context in which the individual is placed, we will not be able to understand how the context is shaping. There is another important aspect which has been neglected, and that is that collective human activities and they relate to culture, they relate to group's identity, they have implications for individual behavior. You can see that in political domain, you can see that in social domain. So what is happening at the group level? What is happening at collective level? That is missing. We are preoccupied with individual level of analysis and we forget that the individual is placed in a social context. That's a big question. What place we give to that? The point which I want to mention is that if you don't pay attention to the collective level of functioning or group or society or culture, then you miss a lot. And you attribute certain individual level function to certain individual level variables, and the picture remains incomplete. Now, the remedy is that we need to emphasize collective processes. We need to see how interpersonal relationships influence. When we try to understand individuals' behavior, we try to understand the functioning of traits. Let me mention a few studies which indicate that the idea of self which we have is shaped by the cultural context in which we live. There are numerous studies which emphasize on independent self-construal and interdependent self-construal. There is a lot of evidence from different parts of the world which indicate that those people who come from collectivist societies, they predominantly share a notion of self which is interdependent. which is relational. On the other hand, those who come from countries which are treated as individualist in cultural orientation, they tend to show a pattern of self-control which is termed as independent. Now, being independent and being interdependent, this is a product of the cultural context in which you live. And having independent or independent self has implications for perception, cognition, motivation, emotion, and all this has been shown in several countries in the last, I must say that about 3-4 decades, continuous work is going on, which is indicating such variations. So the nature of self depends on culture, and the way you conceptualize about self is showing how you perceive, how you relate, how you conduct yourself. So unless you pay attention to the context, you are not able to explain the behavior of an individual. Similarly, we often think that we consider various personality traits. There is a long list of personality traits, and they are of various kinds. We know about certain tests, and they do refer to a number of personality traits, whether it is Cattell or Ising or Jung or Macrae and Costa. If you look at the various tools which are there, they consider, and the idea that we borrow from them is that these traits influence the behavior of people. Do these traits operate independent of the context? That's a big question. Is an introvert person introvert everywhere? One who is considered, who has scored high on extroversion, does it mean that he's extrovert everywhere? It's a big question, whether it is consistent across all the situations. Perhaps no. In fact, in personality research, we find that situation-specific traits, now they have started talking about that. So, traits don't operate independently. Simply measuring a trait and trying to understand or predict behavior of an individual is an expectation which will not be supported by data. That's a big issue. Because the trait or disposition does not operate in vacuum. They operate in a particular context. So the environmental influence does provide certain basis support for the manifestation of behavior. So there is no direct relationship between trait and behavior. It's difficult. You can assume it, but it doesn't occur. You need to see how those traits which you have selected operate in a particular cultural, social context. So we need to understand that also. We also find that people have awareness of their personal existence or consciousness, awareness of the social norms, and the collective life is often organized by those norms. Well, I am mentioning this with a serious request. The request is that you are behaving because you are a member of a group and the group maintains certain norms. So the behavior is simply because you are part of the group and therefore you are following it, and then normative behavior is occurring. Now, please remember, because norm is there and therefore you are doing it, there is no causal relationship between the two. Assuming that everything is related to something and there is a causal relationship is overgeneralization. It is not cause-effect relationship. It is regulated by the norms. And particularly in Indian and South Asian countries, this normative behavior is very, very important. What one has to do, what one is supposed to not indulge into. There are certain norms, and as a member of the group, you need to observe that. Now, there is no causal relationship between something else and behavior. It is simply you are following certain norms. So there is some consistency in behavior. Now, we also find that what kind of behavior is present depends on the kind of social support which is present. I just want to inform you, share with you that overemphasis on individual traits does not lead to proper understanding of variation in human behavior or adjustment or achievement or accomplishment. We need to incorporate the contextual variables to explain the degree of variation in behavior. As a psychologist, we are interested in explaining behavior and we are happy with the trait. But this is something which leads to a kind of misunderstanding. In fact, there is no causal relationship. It's very difficult to prove that. And we neglect the contextual variables. In any study where we are using some trait or disposition or attribute of a person, I think it is important to take into account the relevant contextual variables which can influence the behavior. So, trait and situation both have to be taken into account. And there is also something very important that if you take contextual factors into account and if you know that which factor supports, which factor does not support, then you have scope for intervention also. If you want to change the behavior, you can change the situation. You can make some effort. But it is very difficult to change the person. Changing the disposition or attribute in an individual is not easy. And our focus is too much on individual dispositions traits. A balanced view will be that the trait in context is taken into account. So, not taking into account the contextual factors, not taking into account the operation of disposition in context is limiting our understanding. I don't think that a human being can be described merely in terms of a list of traits. You have certain traits, and I think we often assume that a personality test provides something which is essence of an individual. And we hope that it will explain everything. That becomes a real problem. We need to see how that trait operates in a particular context. Only then we will be able to achieve some understanding and learn about the possibility of change or modification in behavior. Now, it's also very crucial to note that all areas of psychology focus on mere individual behavior. The unit of study is individual behavior. Psychology is considered a scientific study of human behavior. But there you talk about individual human behavior. Now, individual human behavior cannot be studied adequately without understanding the relational world in which the person lives. It's not only that any task requires collaboration and cooperation with others. It is also important that how we perceive ourselves, how we adjust, all that is influenced by the relationship in which we are living. And if you just look at the number of studies where relational work is taken into account, or intergroup or interpersonal behavior is studied, it's very low. You collect data on individual. You don't bother about the interpersonal or group level behavior and group level attributes which influence the behavior of people. I also want to emphasize that there are many phenomena in our society which are at group level or community level, and our understanding is very limited. For several decades, I have been following the work on poverty and socioeconomic status or social class. Now, that is a reality. And you belong to a particular ethnic group. All this is part of reality. You can see what is the role of ethnic groups or poverty or social class. It is visible in our social national life, how it is being used or abused. But the point is that these group level processes do influence. Our research often neglects this. How poverty shapes our thoughts, our emotions, is not sufficiently understood. We need to understand that. Similarly, gender is also a problem. So, gender, ethnicity, poverty, these are group level processes. Since our focus is largely on individual, we don't pay attention to it. Very little attention is paid to these group level processes. The more recent development which has taken place or taking place is in the area of positive psychology. I understand that the work is important in drawing our attention to positive attributes. So, love, creativity, spirituality, forgiveness, are getting attention from researchers. There are many other ideas like flow, resilience, various positive emotions like happiness are being studied and their role is being recognized. It is good that from preoccupation with negative experiences like stress, tension, anxiety, now there is a shift that you are trying to understand the positive things. Fine. But merely taking into account positive is not enough. It is the relative presence of positive, negative, which will be important. And also, there is an important role of hedonistic as well as eudaimonistic notions or variations in conceptualization of happiness. not simply to satisfy your needs, but also to pay attention to virtues, behaviors which are desirable. That is also very important. There is discussion about pleasant life, engaged life, meaningful life. So I think overemphasis on being cheerful, being happy is inadequate. You need to understand that it's very complex. Focusing largely on the positive side of behavior will be lopsided. You need to understand what is the role of negative experiences also, and how you deal with negative experiences. I just refer to one concept which comes from Indian perspective. Some of you or most of you must have heard about a text called Bhagavad Gita. Now, Gita talks about a kind of behavior which is reflected in steady mind, sthita pragya. Now, that mind state is a balanced state. You are not influenced by positive events, and you are also not influenced by negative events. They are not controlling you. How you can maintain an equilibrium, equanimity? Because peace of mind will be possible only in that state. So you need to develop an approach where you are not unnecessarily influenced by positive or unnecessarily influenced by negative. I'm using the word unnecessary, but the idea is that how you react to these negative and positive events. If, as a student of positive psychology, you emphasize only on positive events, that will be problematic for adjustment. There are many ideas which have been developed. For example, there is a concept of resilience, that you live in difficult conditions and still you are able to respond well and you can stand in that situation. So a broader view is required. I also think that the systems which are present in society, the justice system or the systems which provide support, if you look at their functioning, how they are influencing, and who is helped by them, and who is not helped by them. The poor, the middle class, upper middle, and higher class, if you look at the distribution of facilities or opportunities, it's not similar. No, they are placed in different situations. Now, the trait will not work. A disposition will not work because the opportunity structure is very different. They allow access to certain things to some people. They don't allow access to certain facilities, certain kinds of assets to certain people. So this variation has to be mapped and seen how it influences. Going beyond the individual and mapping the context in which the individual lives becomes a crucial question which determines human behavior. Now, when we deal with these questions, I have just simply touched the limited view of psychology, which is because of reductionistic bias, because of individual-centric approach, because of preoccupation with positivity, because of preoccupation with analyzing behavior in terms of individual behavior. These are certain illustrations which indicate that our effort is insufficient. Now, we need a psychology which helps people, which nurtures people, which allows people to grow. I think quality of life is a major challenge, how that can be achieved. This is one thing. And one issue which bothers me, and many people think about it, that we don't study the whole individual. You can focus on one variable, one process. The totality is not taken into account. This is an important gap. I mean, you study one phenomena, you don't bother about anything else. How far you can do justice with other factors which can influence it depends on the resources which are available. But simply, we are following certain methods. Research is done because there is a test. So there is a method, therefore you do the research. These are the issues which are there. We are preoccupied with that. That's a real problem. We need to see what concept is required and what is the real issue. And then we can develop the method. New methods can be developed. I must say that in the area of methodology, there is a lot of innovation which is taking place. For example, we have not only the third person approaches, second person approaches, but we have first person approach. You can experience, and that experience is very legitimate. If you look at the Handbook of Qualitative Methods, you will find a chapter which is on, autoethnography. That is, it's ethnography of self. I'm just giving you an example. This is a first person approach. Or a yogi performs yoga and reports changes. Now, that should be considered as data. This is a very important question. We consider objectivity in the data in such a way that we try to convert everything into numbers. We try to convert every aspect of subjective life in terms of certain concrete indicators. But we lose a lot of information in that. Therefore, it is required that first person method should also be taken into account. I also want to share that these issues have led to certain movements in psychology. For example, there is movement called cross-cultural psychology that let us go to not only your own culture, but you also go to other cultures. Then you will have an expanded view of reality. Here the problem is that the basic theory comes from the Western world. And you compare people from different cultures, and they are judged according to Western cultural tests, ideas, concepts, theories, and that is not appropriate. I think the cross-cultural psychology often assumes that there is some kind of universal psychology and there is variation in quantity across different cultures. That is one position taken by cross-cultural psychologists. There is another move which is related to cultural psychology, which considers that culture plays a formative role. Culture determines various psychological processes. We need to look at that. We need to understand that. So, culture has a significant role to play. It's not merely location and you compare things. A number of cultural psychological studies have been undertaken which throw light on the role of cultural processes in the construction of psychological processes. So in some way, psychological processes are dependent on culture. That is a very different position. Similarly, there are moves which focus on indigenous psychology, psychology rooted in a culture which grows, which develops in a particular context. One needs to understand that it is not a mechanical process which operates, which works with the help of mind or brain, and then you find some variation in behavior. There is an interesting approach which tells that even neuropsychological studies indicate that a brain grows, develops in a particular cultural context. So the brain functioning will not be same everywhere. One of the leading neuropsychologists, her name is Lisa Feldman Barrett. She has just published some very interesting stuff. Her book has a title, How Emotions Are Made, and the subtitle is The Secret Life of Brain. And she argues that brain responds in terms of concepts, right? Brain does not respond to each and every stimulus. The response is based on clubbing them, clustering takes place. And a particular concept category, all those stimuli which belong to that will be responded to according to the concept. So, brain, on the basis of earlier experience, develops concepts and perceives, responds to incoming stimuli on the basis of those concepts. It is not just one-to-one relationship. There are also insights which are coming from neuroscience which tell that it is not that getting information from outside, but there is interoception. You get information from inside body, and brain integrates the two. And more interestingly, it is being reported that some kind of representation of those stimuli and those experiences takes place below the cortex. So the understanding which is coming up that there is one level of representation below the cortex, and that interacts with what is happening at the level of cortex. So the self, consciousness, all those concepts emerge in the interaction between the lower level and higher level. how it happens, it has to unfold. So, how culture, brain, behavior relate is becoming a critical question in contemporary psychology. This is one major development. I have also indicated that at another level, you see how group or collectivity or culture or context shapes our behavior. Let me complicate this matter further. The complication is that people differ in the way they think that context influences behavior. There is a very interesting paper by a scholar named A.K. Ramanujan. A.K. Ramanujan was a scholar. He was an anthropologist, sociologist, and philosopher at Chicago University. And he, long back, I think it was in 1989, that he wrote a paper. Is there an Indian way of thinking? Is there an Indian way of thinking? How we conceptualize, how we think. And one of the major propositions of his work is that Indian thinking is context sensitive. That a particular word or behavior has one meaning in one context, another meaning, the same behavior may mean something else in another context. So the context to which the stimulus or event or the person belongs is more important than the individual or event or person. So how context shapes our behavior? That also varies from culture to culture. We need to understand that also. Now, there has been a lot of hue and cry about the limitations of the Western concepts, but we are using that. There are certain aspects of hardcore reality. For example, countries which are poor, they have limited resources, resource scarcity. Many of the communities do feel helplessness. There is hunger, shortage of food. Now, these are aspects of reality within which you are living, growing, working, relating, pursuing the goals in life. Many non-Western countries and cultural settings suffer from many problems. The environment is more predictable in certain countries. In other countries, it is not predictable, it is not consistent. Something which is taken for granted in one setting is problematic in the other setting. You can't. That's the problem. So there is unpredictability. There is lack of consistency. There is lack of systemic support. If that is the situation, and that is the situation for a large section of society, how you can apply the principles which require a stable, predictable environment? It's very difficult. So one has to recognize this and see what kind of effort has to be undertaken. The countries which are rich, enough resources, their functioning their challenges are quite different. It's not easy to compare different cultures because there are other issues also. If you take mental health issues, you may find that many developed countries have greater degree of mental health problems as compared to middle income countries or some lower income countries. How to explain that? Money can't solve all the problems. Now, there is another question which requires our serious attention. The use of methods is often considered as something which contributes to progress of knowledge and contributing to development and build scientific spirit, all that is there. If you go deep, at deeper level, if you try to understand that, then you find that many of the findings are because of the method that you have used. And many of the methods are problematic in many ways. The tests that we use, the tools that we use have cultural roots. Their assumptions are related to culture. The research procedures are also of that kind. And then there is another very important issue which we often forget, that most of the measures and tools belong to a kind of research which is coming from laboratory or artificial conditions. Real life conditions and studying behavior in real life is considered as useless. We don't like to do that. And there is very large gap between the artificial condition of laboratory and the real life situation. We are not able to bridge that gap. If you want to understand real life challenges, if we want to respond to that, we need to understand behavior in that context. So doing something in laboratory and taking that to society is quite problematic. You must have heard about culture fair tests, culture free test. It's a very difficult assumption. Can we do that? I think it is better to use culturally appropriate, one which is suitable to a particular cultural setting. Then you can assess a variable, understand a process, and that will be okay. We don't do that. As a researcher, we need to understand the limitation of these methods, tests, tools, the procedures that we use. Similarly, we often rely on quantitative methods which provide one kind of understanding. We often use scales and various psychological tests where we transform the experience into numbers. We do that. And we study behavior of another person. And we try to make a statement about the relationship about variables. We try to make predictions. We don't have intimate understanding of the process which takes place. There are two variables you have measured them with the help of some tool, And then you try to do a correlation, find out the relationship between those two variables. And from there, you make an inference that this is related to this leads to this. All such assumptions are made. But you don't observe really that this leads to this. In order to understand this, there are moves in qualitative research where we try to understand the process, not the discrete variables, but the process which takes place. Not an outsider's perspective, but an insider's perspective. You try to see the process as it is. We try to not merely quantify, but make sense of that. Not numbers, but the meanings are important. Now, meanings, processes, insider perspective, and understanding the nature of change which takes place. All these attributes of methods are found in qualitative approaches. And there is more and more interest among researchers to use qualitative methods to understand various phenomena, where phenomena is studied in context, where phenomena is studied as it progresses, as change takes place. Only then we are able to understand the nature of behavior and change that takes place. Only then we are able to understand the connection. We need to discover that, we need to understand that. It's a big question before us. We also have different levels of behavior, and we have not been able to understand, like if you have EEG pattern, you have a measure of personality, you have observed behavior of a person in particular setting. We have not paid attention to how they are related. More recently, there is another set of data which is coming up, which comes from social media. You have so much data available about human emotions, conflicts, stress, tension, initiatives, group behavior, anger, so many things. We don't make any effort to use that kind of data. And many people are spending a lot of time in their engagement with various kinds of social media. So how this engagement is shaping the behavior? Other behavior is also influenced. I think you must have heard about internet addiction as a category which has been introduced by psychiatrists. So the range of behavior, I will say that it is contribution of technology, it is contribution of culture in which we are living. So the domain of behavior, how this technologically informed behavior is shaping our behavior pattern is another issue which is coming up. It's not only from the side of pathology, but from other perspectives too. We have not developed any systematic way to articulate the collection of this data, analysis of this data. I think with more and more use of mobile, computer, laptop, internet, the nature of creativity is being influenced. It's a big issue, how it is going to shape our world, our experience. So the list of variables is increasing, the processes are increasing, and we need to take into account how these processes are going to shape our behavior. Now, the qualitative methods require certain approaches which are different, certain perspectives which are different from the quantitative approaches. Let me mention just one. We often think about sampling and we try to make generalizations. And in qualitative approach, the focus is on cases. The focus is on theoretical sampling. That what is appropriate from the perspective of the theory, rather than the number of subjects or instances which are being taken into account. This is a question which is very crucial and which is influencing the pattern of behavior. So, qualitative approaches offer another kind of a research paradigm, I would like to say, as compared to quantitative approaches. More recent developments focus on using a mixed methodology where we either begin with qualitative and go to quantitative, or begin with quantitative and go to qualitative. How the two are combined, how multiple methods are being used. So, methodology should not dictate the nature of research. Methodology has to follow the goals of research. We need to bother about it, and we need to develop appropriate methods of analysis. And as I have mentioned, not only the verbal behavior and the data that we get with rating skills is enough. We need to go for observation. We need to go for ethnography. We need to go for long interviews. There are many other methods which are very important and which can provide access to a variety of data which we often miss when we go to rely merely on quantitative tools and measures. So, the future of psychology, which we have in 21st century, which has to be global, which has to connect with society, has to see first the normative aspect of behavior, not merely only causal relationships, not merely a reductionistic approach, but understanding the whole, understanding the role of context, understanding meaning, and developing greater sensibility to the cultural context in which behavior occurs. These are some of the ideas which I wanted to share with you, and purpose was to sensitize you that you should have a critical understanding of methods of issues that we study. We need to be aware of the fact that it is not merely that there is some kind of universal psychology and which has to be studied in different cultures, in different settings. There is a possibility of different kinds of psychologies in different cultural
ఉంటుందంట. హలో జనార్దన్ రెడ్డి సార్.
Yes, yes.
Sir, some problem is there with Girishwar Mishra, sir, mobile. Please contact him on phone. ఎవరు జనార్దన్ సార్?
మిశ్రా సార్. కంక్లూడ్కి వచ్చింది.
It seems he is having some technical issue.
Sir has come, sir. Please,
Jai.
sir.
Yes, Jai. Okay.
Sir, Mishra ji.
Okay,
Okay, sir,
yes,
now-
please.
Is it okay, sir, now?
Yeah.
Okay. Now the house is
I
open
hope.
for. Can you ask for questions from the audience, from the students, participants?
Open.
Yes.
Yes. Students, now, yes, Professor Mr. has critically analyzed the approaches and the principles being followed in non-Western countries. He raised a question: can you adopt the same principles, same methodologies in non-Western countries also? The methods and principles developed in Western countries, which are mostly laboratory based, can we use them? That was the question he raised. He made a critical analysis, I said earlier. It is revolutionary. He has thrown much insights to understand complex human behavior. Now the students are free now to ask the questions. You can get the clarifications from our expert. If you have any doubts. Observations are welcome from the participants. First, I ask one question, Mr. See, Cattle has developed culture-free intelligence test. Is it not really culture-free test? Can you use that test, intelligence test developed by Cattle, which is titled culture-free? Can you use the same test in India?
Sir, again, there is a problem.
Sir, it's not there, I think. Some, sir.
Hello?
You are not getting voice.
You're not getting? Okay. There is some problem for Mr. Z.
Some technical error, sir.
Technical error. Okay, we can ourselves we can discuss. Meanwhile, you will join.
Sir.
Participants, we can have the discussion.
Anybody wants to pose any questions, please.
Hey, what he said, just to summarize, he said this studies conducted in individualistic societies, that is Western countries. All right, sir. Yeah, Jain.
Yeah, please repeat.
The point here is culture, the test developed by Cattle, that is intelligence test. He called it culture-free test, telling that it can be used in any culture. The question is?
Yes.
When he said that is culture-free test, it means that can be used anywhere.
Right.
How can we use it now, according to you?
No. The problem is that you think that a particular task is not a task which requires any cultural assumption. So it is free from cultural assumption how something is used. I'm sure that even a utensil or any object which is there has different meaning in different cultural contexts. So normally we think that performance tests are adequate.
Okay.
And if you take that in your research, then you have greater scope to tap without any influence of culture. But I think that assumption is inadequate.
Okay.
You need to do some pilot work, some testing, and you need to ensure that what are the cultural assumptions in the use of those objects, which are performance tests or such tests which are labeled as culture free. I don't think anything is culture free.
Sir,
it means it needs to be revalidated in different cultures.
Sure, it has to be. We can't accept that assumption as it is.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sir, Mishra ji,
Ji.
I don't have much knowledge in psychology, but thing is now world is burning. Some class struggle is going on in many countries. Rulers and agitators. Are there any studies are going on that on their psychological status? On their psychological status, rulers and agitators. Nowadays, world is burning, sir. Class struggle is going on in every part of every corner of this world. So, is there any study on their psychological status? Got my point, sir.
I understand your concern and I appreciate that. The kind of situation which is emerging,
Sir.
And which is being experienced in different settings.
Sir.
You see, one side of the border has one kind of perception.
Sir.
The other side of the border has one set of perception. And what is right and what is wrong, you can't tell it. It's a very cool. Our perception is different, and the two parties which are involved, they have their separate, independent perceptions, their motives, their interests, and we can see, for example, in Gaza, more than 40,000 people have been killed.
Yeah.
Or similarly, on other places also, what is happening in Ukraine and Russia, at least these two events are very, very difficult conditions. And it requires serious intervention from political parties. Only then something can be done. It has been escalated to a level which requires very serious intervention, but nobody is ready. So the views and perceptions, there are studies which report, the kind of devastation, the kind of problems, the loss of life, all that has happened. Maybe there will be studies on mourning, studies on grief, all those things will take place. But the immediate question is how to stop this. And that requires only political intervention. That's, the kind of challenge that the world is facing. At ideological level, coexistence has become a real issue. We know that nonviolence and coexistence and sharing with others, compassion, these values are very crucial, very important. But when other issues are given greater importance, forget about all these things. We have to fight, we have to maintain our identity, we have to get this. So what dominates in that situation? And the perception of the other becomes very important. And we really do not know what kind of turn these things are taking, because we recently heard that the head of the nuclear, setup in Russia was killed by Ukraine, how they do it. So the intensity of involvement is very high. These studies which are possible, I don't think they can do it in that situation and they can solve the problem. It requires only political intervention which can help. No one is listening.
There is one question from the participant.
Yeah.
One participant question is with each generation, human behaviors and habits are evolving due to various influencing factors. So, how can we establish firm principles in psychology to effectively understand and explain these changes? That is a question by a student.
Very interesting question. Very important question. One image of psychology is that it is universal, and universal means across time and space. I'm sure that is not happening. We need to understand it again, perhaps with a different tool. Life was very different when we had black and white TV. It changed when we got the color TV. Then it changed when we got internet. Then there are many other changes which are taking place. Satellite has improved and many other things are now possible. So the intervention of technology has changed the nature of our experience. The kind of mobile that you have will decide what has to be remembered and what has to be uh, put in the mobile. So all these changes are taking place. So we can't have such principles. I think it's wrong to assert that we will be able to have a principle which is free from space-time constraints. I think it will be limited. It has to be. There is no other option. You have to re-examine, you have to update, you have to develop new concepts, new theories. I think that is the need. We need to do that. I mean, that has happened within psychology itself. You started with one factor of intelligence, and today Gardner talks about multiple intelligences, not just one intelligence and factors of one intelligence, but there are different kinds of intelligence, 9, 10, 11 types of intelligence. And all of them have different set of operations and all that. So the conceptual growth that we have also tells that the situation is changing. We need to revise our thoughts. So something can be good for some time. You have to revisit it. The parameters, the constructs, the patterns of behavior do vary across time. I mean, what was true once upon a time, 50 years ago, what is true now? Those norms, patterns of behavior, even simple things. I don't want to uh, give more details, but now the food habits have changed. So the pizza has become very important, many other tastes, various things, street food is coming up and whatnot. Things are changing at that level. In terms of agenda, what we have to study, it will be decided by the problems of the contemporary time. So one has to prepare in tune with the constraints and affordances. What are the possibilities? What is new? I think that has to be recognized. What can be done within that? If you don't respond to that, then you will become useless. That's the situation. So updating of social science research, keeping in tune with or aligning with the changing situation size, that is a limitation. We can't have the principles which can go across all periods and across all settings. That's a very difficult question. We don't have any such principle. Whatever principles we have, like how physical systems operate, biological systems operate, uh, there are certain things which can be measured, which can be shown, and within certain range you can see the change which takes place. Otherwise, in many, many situations, things are very, very different. They are in the constructed world. You had UPA, a very important force. Now you have NDA, another force. We don't know what is going to happen in future. You see what is the situation, how reality is being created by your shared exposure, intervention, and initiative. So reality is constantly changing. I mean, you can have a vision, you can make a proposal, you can pursue it. It may be accepted, and a new idea may come up. So it's all constructed word. So this postmodern world that we have, the earlier idea, which was more close to the modernity, where you thought that there are scientific principles which can be applied to any setting, I think that dream has shattered. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Your thought-provoking lecture we experienced. Now I request Dr. Sriveni Garu to say a formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. It's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of the Department of Psychology, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, for today's insightful webinar on the topic psychology and its concern, theoretical and applied issues. First and foremost, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed speaker, Professor Girishwar Mishra, sir, for sharing their valuable expertise. I truly appreciate for the effort invested in making this webinar informative and interactive. The session provided valuable perspective on so many points, sir, such as reductionism, human functioning, personality traits, which influence the human behavior. And sir has also explained about the normative behavior, positive psychology, and pleasant life. He also talked about the Bhagavad Gita, which tells about the balanced stage of mind. And sir has also explained about the resilience and the importance of cultural psychology and neuropsychology, how human behavior is functioning in these aspects, and how it can be applied in different aspects. Your deep knowledge and clear explanation enriched our understanding of the topic and making complex concepts both accessible and engaging, sir. Thank you for your sharing your insights and fostering such a thought-provoking discussion, sir. I would also like to express my sincere thanks to the Dean Faculty of Social Sciences, Professor Srinivas Vadanam, sir, for his visionary leadership and unwavering support, sir. And also, I would like to thank Professor Janardhan Reddy, sir, Dr. Narsimlu and Guravaya for organizing this event seamlessly. I sincerely thank my colleagues and all the participants, particularly our students, for their active participation in online mode. And lastly, I extend my gratitude to the technical team for ensuring the smooth conduct of the webinar. Thank you, one and all, for being a part of this event and giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
So thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, Mr. Raji. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Srinivas sir, Reddy sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your great help. Thank you.